Coach Bianco, thank you very much for joining me today and taking the time out of your day to join me on this episode of SimpleCoach to Coach.
Yeah, happy to be here. Glad we could do this.
So just for the record, we've been talking about how I'm a Mount Union grad, and I just want the record to state that I think it was my sophomore year when I was playing in goal. I shut out Denison, and then my senior year when I moved to forward, yes, that's a true story. I actually scored 2 goals in our 2-1 victory over Denison University. Yeah, so I carry that as a badge of honor, at least for right now, because I can't believe I remembered that. But anyhow, hey, why don't you maybe you could kick off just telling us about your coaching journey, sort of any coaches that may have influenced you in your path to where you are now.
Right. Yeah, sure. I would say I definitely had probably kind of the quintessential youth soccer upbringing for a child of the 90s. Did the club thing, ODP, and a lot of our families, trips and vacations oftentimes revolved around soccer tournaments. And so, I was always around the game. My father was the head coach at Ohio State from 78 to 86, and then did a lot of club coaching outside of that. And, took us to World Cups and season ticket holder for the Columbus Crew ever since they came to the Columbus area, which is where I grew up. So I think my introduction to the game was always, really around my father, and he certainly was somebody that played a big part in my love for the game. And then when I went off to college, which I didn't go too far, I went to Ohio Wesleyan University. The other big mentor in my life was Dr. J. Martin, who's still coaching, and I couldn't have asked for a better 4-year college experience at Ohio Wesleyan in the classroom, but in particular on the athletic side. And those 4 years there were just really special. And I thought, everybody just kind of had the same kind of playing experience that I had as a player there. And it took some perspective to recognize that maybe wasn't always the case. And at the time at Ohio Wesleyan was just really, really special. So that was really wonderful. And I was fortunate enough to coach there as an assistant for 5 years, had a good run for 5 years. Again, I didn't really recognize how wonderful of an experience and how lucky I was to have that. And in a lot of ways, I almost wish that 5-year experience at Ohio Wesleyan happened at a different time, when maybe my perspective would have been a little bit different, because we lost, 8 games in 4 years as a player, and maybe 6 or 8 games in 5 years as an assistant coach. And I just kind of thought, well, that's how it is. And then I went to Case Western Reserve University, which had won 38% of its games in the 30 years prior to my arrival. And we lost more games in one season than we did in 5 years as an assistant. So it was very different. But my time at Case was equally wonderful. Really made me the head coach that I am. Made incredible relationships with players and colleagues. And, being able to come here to Denison has been a different experience, especially with COVID, but I know we can jump into that down the road.
Yeah, so let's jump into that. You were hired just before the lockdown, right?
As it locked down, yep.
Yeah. Like I think when it was announced, it was pretty early on, or just, I can't remember.
It was prior to April, yeah.
Yeah.
Was my start date, and the intention was I'd start in time for the players to get back from spring break and do a spring season, and then they never came back. So.
Yeah. And so 2021 was your first full fall season. Right. What's that like? What were the challenges as you're trying to, get your stamp on the team and sort of start getting it into to play in the direction that you ultimately envision the program to be playing?
Yeah. So the immediate challenge, I guess, was just kind of logistically of how I integrated myself to the program and how we got to build some relationships. Because as I said, so April 1, when I was supposed to start, that was when the players were supposed to come back and they never came back. And, I think had I not taken over a program previously, had I been a first year head coach, I think that situation would have been a lot more challenging. And then you add in the layers personally of, trying to sell a house during a pandemic and
Oh my God.
moving and childcare, all these things that I think are easy to kind of gloss over when you take over a program, but those things are equally more important or as important, if not more. But I guess just in terms of the program, for me, it was we had to use the opportunity that we had using, Zooms and things like this to just start to build relationships and do a really kind of thorough, formal inventory about not only each player, but about the program in particular, just kind of at a macro level. And that really was done over Zoom, over time. And then when the players got back, it allowed us to kind of have a foundation of where they were coming from, but also kind of give the guys a foundation of what we were looking for moving forward. And not having a season in 2021, and I've told people this, it was a blessing in disguise for a program like ours, because we, when you take over a program, I mean, everybody's just trying to, create whatever your standards are, whatever your environment is, the expectations that you have for your team. And we had a year where we didn't have to play anybody else. We didn't have to focus on doing a scout on somebody for the first game or worry about anything other than let's show up on time, work really hard, care about each other, and have attention to detail. And we got to do that for 105 sessions last academic year, which I think just allowed us to kind of hopefully in some ways accelerate where we went this year. But it took a lot of work. There was a lot of times where we really had to grow. And I couldn't be more proud of the guys for where we were and where we are. I mean, we had a spring where we played 3 scrimmages, played Kenyon, Ohio Wesleyan, and DePaul, 3 teams in our league.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't win a game, we didn't score a goal, but each and every moment we had tangible growth that we could really pull out. And we knew we were always going to get there. And I think we certainly haven't even scratched the surface of how good we can be, but nonetheless, we're making some strides. So it was good.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that because I even noticed strides in the fall season when you played, when I watched at the beginning of the season and then at the end. So I got to ask, because we were talking about Carter Poe, who's now the Case Western Reserve coach, who was at Mount Union, which is where I graduated from, and Dave Krems is there now. You're at Case, right? I mean, academics are a fantastic school. You're doing well. The program has turned around, and then you have this opportunity at Denison and the chance to join the Big Red. What was the thinking there, and what was the reasoning to I guess maybe come back home, or at least to the area, Columbus area?
Yeah. There was a lot to it. What I'll say is, the Case Western Reserve University, the environment, the campus being in the Cleveland area, we loved every second of it. We absolutely loved it. And just for context, this is me being a naive first-time head coach when I took the job in 2013. I came from Ohio Wesleyan, and I went to Case, and I thought, oh well, they're both Division III. They're the same. And then you go from a small liberal arts private college in a college town to a big urban research institution, and they were just different. And they're not better or worse. It was just very different. My time at Case was incredible. You know, I just went to dinner in Chicago this past weekend with 4 of my former players, and the relationships that we built were absolutely fantastic. And for us to kind of have the success that we did, even in the years where maybe it didn't always go as well as we would have hoped, the quality of the work was fantastic. The standards and everything in it was wonderful, and we always punched above our weight. I mean, I don't know what the number is, but I mean, we routinely were beating or getting results against top 5, top 10 teams, and it was almost every single year. So leaving my baby, I mean, that program was my baby, and leaving it was incredibly hard. It was even harder when I had to tell the guys over Zoom because of COVID and everything else, and not being able to do the kind of goodbye that I was looking for. But what drew me to Denison more than anything else was just the opportunity to build something that I thought was so incredibly special. I mean, there aren't many places in our country like Denison that offer the level of academics and athletics that are here. And I really felt like we could offer one of the premier environments in the country to do so. And my first kind of welcome to college soccer moment when I was a freshman in 2003 at Ohio Wesleyan was actually when we came here to Granville to play Denison, when Denison was number 2 in the country. Ohio Wesleyan was number 8 or 9. There's 16 or 1,800 people at the game. Denison wins 2-1. And it was like, whoa, this is pretty incredible. And the program has done well. We've been to the tournament 9 times. And as you look around the department, everybody's really good here. The programs are really, really well resourced. And I just kind of felt for us personally and professionally, this was the right move at the right time. And I couldn't have been happier about the transition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Denison is a unique place. I mean, it's a beautiful campus, and a lot of reasons to be at Denison, and it's one of those schools that I think has a upside that is probably hard to find in college soccer and Division III soccer. Hey, I know you touched upon the difficulties of COVID from a coaching perspective. Could you just talk about perhaps what was that COVID year like for your players? New coach and everything Zoom and.
Yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty, certainly with new coach. You know, the guys were trying to figure out what I was going to be about, what the new expectations and standards might look like. And honestly, just it rocked their world. I mean, they go from being on campus around their friends every day. I mean, we're residential only. There's no off-campus living. So just kind of the day-to-day environment here is a little bit different, where it's, you know, the relationships are so strong, and to go from being in this environment to, you know, sitting on mom's couch in the basement, really was challenging. And again, like, we got to come in that next year and just kind of train, which was really nice all year. But at the same time, it was just kind of reacclimating them to being a college student, even as hard as that was, with restrictions and pods and all the things that some of the other coaches have all talked about. But yeah, it's definitely been a transition, and I hope and think that we're kind of on the right side of it now. But certainly there's some residual effects on kind of where the athletes are and what it's going to look like moving forward.
Wow. So you're building your team culture and all those things. Can I ask, because I'm always curious about these, do you have certain non-negotiables, as in, if you are a player who is going to be a part of this Denison program, these are the 1, 2, 3, 10, 20 things that you must adhere to?
Yeah, no, there's not. It's pretty straightforward. And we start every year and every semester and everything else talking about our very clear vision for the program, which is to be one of the premier environments in the country to combine academics and soccer. Again, there's not a lot of places like a Denison, and the ones that are doing it, like I look at what Coach Wagner has done at F&M, very similar type of place. I mean, he's the model. Even the Hopkins, the Tufts, all those places that are high academic places are all kind of doing it. And how it gets done, I think, is part of the fun of coaching. But we've never shied away from the vision that we've had for the program, and really, it's we have general kind of guardrails. But I'm not a coach that gives the guys 2 pages of rules and says sign it at the bottom. Because in my opinion, quite honestly, like, these kids are going to go off and work for Deloitte in New York City or wherever, and they're not going to get that from a boss.
No.
They're going to say, hey, we expect you to align with the vision that we have and work as hard as you possibly can to do it. And I want to give the guys the autonomy and the freedom to make this experience what it is. And so I hopefully encourage them to take ownership over that. But they certainly know, they're smart enough. These are smart kids. They know what's right and wrong. They know that, at a very basic level, care about each other, put the team first, be on time, as hard as you can. I mean, they don't need me telling them above and beyond that. It all kind of organically comes together. But yeah, that's basically how I've kind of done it. And I think when you do that, at least what I've found is, we have 15, 16, 17 different states on our team. When I was at Case, it was very similar. We're socio-economically and geographically and diversity-wise are very kind of diverse and all over the place. And I want to allow all of those different life experiences to kind of come into this melting pot and come together. And so if it was really kind of a my way or the highway approach, I don't think we're maximizing the kind of culture that I hope to build here.
Yeah. I always say too, like when I think about that, and I pretty much ask all the coaches about that, because I just think it's that's child of the 80s. I knew coaches who were, sign on the bottom line is what you're committing to. And I remember how I bristled at that idea as a player. Right. So I could imagine as a coach, right? Like, treat me like as a player, treat me like an adult, and I'll honor that more so than if you beat me over the head with a bunch of rules. Let me ask. So what were sort of your, knowing all the crap that you sort of had to go through leading up to the fall? What were your expectations? Like, right? Like you said you had 105 practices to help court. That's all great and stuff. And I'm sure there were issues with that. But your first real time of, hey, now I get all these guys together. I can get them to play. I can see what I got. Yeah. What were?
Yeah. So I knew we had a fantastic goalkeeper who was going to be a 5th year.
Yeah.
And I also, I knew 3 things coming out of the COVID year. First one was we had a goalkeeper that was going to keep us in a lot of games. I knew that we had to solve the goal scoring because we didn't do it in the 3 games that we had. And quite frankly, we just weren't as consistent in front of goal in the training that we had. But I also knew that the intangible things that we had to work on were really coming together. For example, we did different intra-squad scrimmages, and maybe our first or second one in the fall, we had a moment where the ball was lost and the other team's going the other direction, and the team that lost the ball had 5 guys walking in recovery. And so we came in that next day, and the guys were thinking we're going to watch, 15 clips or whatever it was, and I just showed them that one. And I said, we will not go where we want to go unless this changes. And none of the other things related to like shape and tactics and all this other crap, in my opinion, mattered until that changed. And by the end of the year, while we maybe didn't get a result, we were really pretty darn close. And so I knew if we kept kind of going in that direction, we'd be fine. But we certainly had to answer the goal scoring piece and shore up some of the back line to allow Dylan Brown, our goalkeeper, to be the Dylan Brown that we felt like he could be.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Dylan Brown, by the way. I think he's a spectacular goalkeeper. In my top 30 some odd players that I picked for the season, he was one of my goalkeepers.
Yeah.
I thought that highly of him. Okay, so we mentioned this in the email exchange ahead of time, where I watched. So, just as a background, so after playing Division III soccer, I followed it for whatever extent that I did. But then this past season, I really got sucked into it, watched over 200 games, like did all sort of crazy stuff, which sort of leads us to how I started this channel. I mean, I have to talk to a therapist about it, because it was that borderline, like, man, are you crazy? So I didn't know any of the coaches' background, team backgrounds, what have you. I was just watching game for game for game, and I was kind of oblivious to all of that. But I watched, and I mentioned this to you, I watched the season opener against Mount Union.
Yep.
And I had mentioned to you that I thought it was an abysmal game. I didn't think it was particularly good, and I wasn't sure what you guys were trying to do, and so anyhow, Mount Union wins, what have you, and I don't want to say dismissed, but I was like, I'm not going to watch Denison. I'll go try some other teams. Could you just help me understand what some of the early challenge, because I'll come back to this, but what your early challenges were in the beginning of the season, especially as you're trying to develop this tactical framework for your team as to how to play?
Right. Yeah. So that game, season openers are really tough every year, right? And then you have a year like ours, and I guess this is where the context is always helpful. But you have a year like we had the previous year, and we didn't play any games really. And then you have a season opener, and we have to integrate 11 new guys in a recruiting class after all these other guys had done all this work to make the strides that they did. And then it's starting over. And then, oh, by the way, you're playing in 10 days or whatever it was. And we were still sorting ourselves out, as most teams were, but especially a program like ours. Nobody in our team had played a college soccer game that had counted in years.
Yeah.
And you go to Mount, which, you're playing on a football field that's 64 yards wide.
Yeah.
And I thought we actually started the match okay, but then had some just, really bad breakdowns, and one of which was just not dealing with an indirect kick well, and we didn't set things up. And it was just these things that were, again, in a lot of ways, a blessing in disguise, because we could have a conversation after the game about really having some urgency to correct some things. And generally, I never try to get too high or too low after a match, but knowing how fast and furious these games happen, I even said to the guys, like, I normally wouldn't do this, but we have to have some urgency to make some of these corrections. And again, if you were to watch their second or third goal, essentially Mount put the ball down. It was indirect. We thought that the kick was coming on a whistle.
Yeah.
Dylan's out of the goal. Mount, we don't set a wall. People are walking. Mount passes it to a guy who passes it into an open net. And that should never happen with a fifth-year senior. Should never happen with some of the guys we had in our team at the time. But what I could pull out of that moment was there was a first year, Cameron McIntosh, that sprinted from the left wing and beat everybody to the ball. And what I tried to draw from that moment was, guys, if everybody had that awareness and work rate to do that and had gotten in front of the ball with Cameron, that goal doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it was more like, we can't focus on anything else until this stuff changes.
Yeah.
And to their credit, I mean, they were always receptive to kind of learn and dive in. And so it just kind of helped us create a foundation for, whatever happened next.
Yeah. I remember that goal, because I think that was where I was like, what's going on here? Because it looked so, I don't know, falling asleep.
It's organized. It was disorganized.
Exactly. Like nobody sort of knew where they were supposed to go. So you go, and then after that game, which is again sort of going back and doing my research, at that point you go on a 4-game winning streak, and you lose close loss to a very good, so happened, the Wilmington College.
Yeah, very good.
You know, this year they came out of, I don't want to say nowhere, but almost seemingly. You know, those urgent course corrections that you talked about after the Mount game, were they starting to take hold? Do you think?
Yeah, you know, I felt like we had, you know, we're also like really specific with some of the things that we ask of the guys. I mean, you know, how we want to be organized defensively, the different ideas that we have when we're in possession, and those things I knew were coming together. We weren't far off. It was cleaning up some of the other things, and the guys' mentality, you know, even when I, you know, first arrived, we had to clean some things up, but their mentality to really work and were eager to change, like was always there. And so it didn't shock me at all that we kind of got on a bit of a roll and found some confidence, and even the Wilmington game, you know, we looked back after that match and said, wow, that was actually one of our better performances. Mm-hmm. We didn't manage moments in transition well. But there's a reason why they won 15 or 16 games, whatever it was. They had some really dynamic guys, but I guess it was just all kind of putting in front of the guys, like, let's grow from each moment, each opportunity. And I felt like we really did that, but we were starting to come together for sure.
Yeah. I always look at those trends during the, you know, hey, wow, you didn't look good that first game against Mount, but then you go on a 4. So something must have, you know, I always look at that as there's got to be a catalyst for a team to start winning games, as far as I, you know, again, from the outside. But, you know, let me ask you something. So, I mean, did you think you could make the NCAC tournament, or was that an objective, and let alone win it? I mean, were you at what point, or was there a point where you thought, hey, we could do this, and we stand as good a chance as anybody, let's just say, to win it?
Yeah, no doubt. I wouldn't have come here if I didn't feel like we could be the, you know, one of the top teams in the region. Certainly win the league, which then, you know, gives you a chance to compete nationally, and for us to be able to do that, you know, early this year was wonderful. But without a doubt, I mean, we always knew we needed to be in the top 4 of the league to get into the conference tournament, and that was something we talked about, it just kind of a baseline of where we felt like we needed to be. And even when we went to Ohio Wesleyan and lost 2-0, we were a bit naive. I thought we were a little bit, you know, scared to kind of play a bit more than we did. And I remember right after the match, I said to the guys, we're going to be back here in Delaware in, you know, whatever it is, 6-7 weeks. And when we come back, I want us to be better than we were tonight. And then a week later, whatever it was, we had a result against Kenyon that was 2-0, and same kind of message. We were better against Kenyon actually the next week. And I just kind of felt, okay, we have an opportunity to kind of hit our stride here, the back half of the conference season. And if we could do that, we'd be able to get the confidence that we needed, that when we went back into those places, we'd be able to go toe to toe with them. And in both of those games, it's just, you know, like most big games, like there's usually a couple of moments that have to decide a match. And in those games, those moments were in their favor and not ours. And so it was really just, let's just keep getting better. And when we go back there, we'll have some confidence and make a go of it. And so I couldn't have been happier for especially our 8 seniors, you know, 3 of which that came back for this year, to kind of taste what they did this year. And you know, they played a big part in it. So I'm really happy they could experience it.
So I watched the final, which was probably like maybe the third game that I watched of yours, against a very, very good Kenyan college. And I was watching, and I would have put money down on Kenyan just because, again, sort of where I was at, like I'm Kenyan, and they have their outside back is probably one of my favorite players from this year, Luke Mother, who's the wing back, who's the absolutely spectacular ball player in my book. But and then again, intentional, not intentional, but it looked like a tactical masterclass from you and your team to deal with pressure from Kenyan that I hadn't seen in a long time, and I definitely hadn't seen in the first game against Mount Union, where defensively you were as organized as I thought that I had seen a team. You were not giving up. You weren't giving up any space in the back. What was this part of the tactic, or was this just how do we deal with Kenyan on the attack all the time? Because it seemed like when you did get forward, it was, I don't want, cautious isn't the right word, but it was purposeful. So we're getting forward if we can get forward, and if not, we're not getting forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no doubt. And I would submit the quality of our goal scoring chances were better than theirs. Just the volume that they had. So a couple things. So the first time we played Kenyan, and I've played Kenyan a ton, obviously being in the region and in the league. This is our, the third time I've beaten Kenyan. They're as good as any program in the country. I have so much respect for those guys. And why they're so good is they're very, they don't deviate from what they do. They are so good at what they do. And it's, when we played them the first time, I felt like we had to disrupt their buildup. And so we tried to play a little bit higher. We tried to take some of the gaps that they try to play into with some of their dynamic midfielders that they catch you on the half turn and they're running at your back line. We tried to break that up. And in many moments, we did a good job. But the moments where they played a little bit more vertically, we were, 2v2 with our center backs against their two strikers, and they're picking up second balls. And then it became a bit challenging. So it's one of those where you either kind of have to make a decision. You're either going to play really high or you're going to play like a mid to low block, tough to break down, and try to get them to be impatient with what they do. And the first game, we played a little bit higher. The second game, we didn't. Ethan Miracle, who we moved from a striker position out wide to deal with their outside back.
He was fantastic, by the way, in that game.
He was.
Shut down Luke Mother. I neutralized him completely.
Right. Yeah. And one of the best performances, I've told Ethan this, one of the best performances individually that I've coached in 14, 15 years of college coaching. And so essentially the decision was we wanted to play a bit lower. Our outside players, what we ask of them and how we play is easily the most challenging position to play in our team. Not only the ask that we have in the attack and possession to be dynamic and break things and break teams down, but especially defensively, they have to cover kind of the forward passing lanes and then get out and press the outside backs, etc. And we didn't feel comfortable. We always felt all year that maybe those spots we just didn't defend as well as I would have liked. And we knew Ethan, with his work rate and his intelligence defensively, we could put him there and he'd do exactly what we asked. And that's what he did. And I think we kind of said to our outside backs to allow our wingers to do the work in front of them. Don't feel like you have to step out right away. And I knew at some point the urgency from Kenyan to get a goal, especially after we scored, was going to force them to be a little bit impatient and just start lumping the balls into the box. And although there was some nervy moments, for the last 25 or 30 minutes, I was pretty comfortable, quite honestly,
Mhm.
because you're lumping the ball into the box on a 6'4" keeper who's great in the air. So I felt like that was okay.
Yeah.
But I
You'll
said,
take that gamble.
I mean, yeah, you gotta take one of them. It's either that or you step higher and they're
Yeah.
combining around you, and they're so good at it. I mean,
Yeah.
I said to those guys after the game, I went to them. They were obviously disappointed, but I said to them, like, you guys are the standard in this league and in this region right now, and I knew they'd get in, and it didn't shock me at all that they had a great performance in their first and second games. Probably should have gone through against Messiah, but
Totally. That's
yeah.
one of my, totally should have
I mean,
gone.
they're real good, and but also we were really good. We
Yeah.
didn't get the result by mistake.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, as I said to the guys, I'm happy that we went through the two powers, Ohio Wesleyan and Kenyon, at their place, because we were always going to have to go through those two to get where we wanted to go as a program. So
Yeah.
it was a great week for sure.
I will say it is true. I think the volume of opportunities was not as high as what Kenyon had, but I never got the sense that Kenyon was going to score because they were so, like you said, they were so far away from getting to the goal. And anytime they did, you're right, Dylan Brown would come out and you're not towering over him. And that your opportunities were, I always had a sense like, yeah, you're going, you can score. I mean, it could be 2 or 3 that you could have scored. They were that close. But speaking of the goal, I mean, I didn't know he was a freshman, Cameron McIntosh.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an incredible goal, 21 minutes in. And those are one of those where it's like, you see your medal as a player. Do you have the wherewithal to take a look, to strike the ball well, do all those things necessary to get the ball to beat the keeper from 40 yards out or whatever it was? But what especially that early in the game, what did that do for your team emotionally? Was it like sort of that, hey, we're convinced we belong here, we could beat these guys? Yeah.
Yeah, there was that, certainly. Yeah, I think it just affirmed to them that, we've set this group up well, and they were prepared and ready for the moment. And I think more than that, like, I think it just gave them that extra boost of confidence. Second game in whatever it was, 3-4 days, really big game, second one on the road. And I just think it gave them a little bit of extra juice, but yeah, definitely more just some confidence that, like, yeah, this moment isn't too big for us, and we can take it. So yeah, Cameron had a really made a great play, and I'm glad the ball fell to him because he's a heck of a player. So.
Yeah. What just in that game, what was your message at halftime, right? You're up by 1. You know what I mean? I'd be expecting an onslaught at that point. How do you get the guys to calm down, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it was balanced. And actually, if somewhere on the wild web is my halftime speech, our sports information department's really fantastic and captured part of it. And kind of the motivational message was, we asked you since August of 2020, when we had no reason to believe, to really think about and believe in the vision that we had to be one of the premier programs in the country. And so it was that, just keep believing in what we wanted to be about. And the guys did, but also tactically, it was more, let's just be really thoughtful about, the different moments in the game and be switched on. If it's a restart, let's make sure we're where we need to be. Let's make sure that we're, getting sideways on and getting to the ball first, and just all kind of like, those little messages we try to say, and who knows if they actually listen, but who knows.
Yeah. As a former player, yeah, sometimes those messages are like, whatever, can we just get back out there?
Right.
So let me ask you, just in terms of where you want to get to, and where you want to get the program, and where the team wants to get their program, right? Like where your current players are. how important was it to winning the NCAC and then getting to the NCAAs for that?
Yeah, I, I don't know that the answer to that question. I mean, in my heart, I would like to say, had we dropped a heartbreaker to Ohio Wesleyan or Kenyon, um, I would hope that the guys are still in the same place that we are now.
Mm-hmm.
I think if nothing else, going to the NCAA tournament was um, definitely just kind of a feather in the cap for all the hard work that they had. And, certainly we wish we would have maybe gone a little bit farther. I mean, but what we've tried to talk about now is more that being the floor, not our ceiling. Going and winning the league tournament was our ceiling for this past group, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But now for this next group, it's the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said earlier, I really don't think that we've even scratched the surface of how good we can be in any facet of the program. Just even on-field stuff. We scored more goals than we had since 2009, conceded fewer goals than we had since 2006, and we haven't even scratched the surface yet. And so I really believe in the direction of the college. The university is in great shape. We're going to be able to recruit high academic kids that are really good players from all over the country, even the world, hopefully. And I just feel really great about the direction, more so because of what's been happening since the guys have been back in January. And as you know, and all these other coaches that have done these have kind of talked about, this is a really important time.
Mm-hmm.
And this group is as locked in as any group I've ever coached.
Mm-hmm.
And so that gets me really excited, and they're taking complete ownership over what's happening, which is just really, really wonderful.
Yeah. That makes me think, how big of a deal do you place on the spring? Obviously, them wanting to be bought in and doing all the work on their own that they're supposed to do, but just from a coaching perspective, how much importance do you place on what you do in the spring as a preparation for what you want to accomplish in the fall?
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, each spring you might have kind of a different theme or objective that you're trying to achieve. Last spring of our COVID year, it was more kind of like team culture, which I don't really love the culture buzzword. The culture for me is what are our habits and behaviors as a program. And so it was really hammering home those things.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're in a different place. Like we still certainly are going to maybe think about that, but really it's, how can we clean up some of the things in our game that I feel like we need to make that next stride on, and really we got to integrate a new goalkeeper. So there's that part of it. So we certainly want to work on the back half, but the front half as well. I think we can be a little more consistent with our attack and be a little more dynamic, and hopefully giving the guys some ideas to do that. And as all of our coaches know, you get into the meat of a fall season, and the opportunity to train the way you want to is so few and far between. And the guys, you meet with them after the year, and they all know it. I mean, they all wish we could scrimmage every day, and we can't, but we can in the spring. So, I think it's an opportunity to really kind of layer in some ideas and give them the volume of opportunity to really, get better and work on some things.
Yeah. Do you, yeah, I'll move on from that. What surprised you the most about where you ended up, about your team, about your players?
I don't know if it was really a surprise necessarily, but I would say the thing that is most meaningful is what this experience meant for all the kids in our program and all of our alums and anybody that remotely cares about Denison soccer. These last 12 months, especially because of COVID, I think there's an immense gratitude over what we get to do. And to see our seniors walk away having this experience, and some of them candidly, probably wish they would have played more. But all of them walk away having incredible relationships and had an experience that nobody can take away from them. And I'm just so grateful to have that for them. But also for our younger guys that are coming back to see, just their work, what they put in, they got something rewarding out of it. And it just kind of reestablished, like I said, what are the expectations moving forward, where hopefully that's our floor and not our ceiling. And, but, so I wouldn't say it was anything that really surprised me. I always kind of felt like we had this in us. So
like, I mean, it was bookends for me watching you guys. And I don't know, what your magic sauce is, but whatever the team that played Mount Union was not the same team that beat Kenyon. Like, it was, and that's a great thing, right? Just because a lot of the things that I saw against Mount Union were not there. Right. Like, were fixed, corrected, what have you, dialed up, right? They were totally dialed up in the Kenyon game.
But I'll tell you, and all the credit goes to them. I mean, there's really nothing that we did as a staff. I mean, our staff's great, but if the guys didn't make the conscious decision to want to be good and to want to be coached, I mean, none of it matters. And so I think that speaks to the leadership of our older guys. It speaks to the younger guys wanting to be great followers. I mean, everything is them. And, I'm really proud of them. I'm really incredibly proud of that group.
Yeah. Every right to that leads me to the leadership on your team from a player's perspective. Where do you think that comes from? Is it mostly, do you think it's from the captains? Do you think it's just the upperclassmen, few select players?
Yeah, it's evolved. Certainly when we first arrived, right, like I had to kind of be a little more intentional in my leadership role over the team. And then once we got our hands on the guys and we got a sense for the personality of the group, we could allow them to take a little more ownership. Lorenz Hoover, who's our all-region guy, rising senior, he sets the standard for everybody. The kid is a beast, and he's easily maybe the best, certainly one of the better 2 or 3 best leaders that I've ever had the pleasure to work with, and it's infectious. I mean, the guys kind of feed off him and the others, and so that's, I think, primarily where it comes from, quite honestly.
Yeah. That's always it's interesting, personalities, right? Like, they sort of percolate up, down, and sort of wait until it's their opportunity to step in, and that's another discussion for another day. But okay, let's shift over to recruiting. I ask this of everybody, and I sometimes I'm starting to think maybe this isn't the right way to ask it, but when you go out recruiting and you're looking for players, and I'm assuming it's going to vary depending on your coaching arc within your team, right? Like how long you've been with the program and whatnot. Yeah. So, but do you go out looking for players, or do you go looking out for positions?
Yeah, it's a blend. So certainly, like, there's some specialty positions in the game that you have to recruit, right? Goalkeeper and probably goal scorer. And but generally, outside of those specialties, you try to recruit, at least we do, as good of players as you can, and you try to do the balancing act of making sure it kind of fits your positional needs that you have in your team. But the big one in recruiting that I try to talk with kids and families about a lot is we just try to recruit people that are maybe a little bit different. And, if we go out to a game, 18 to 19 of the 22 guys in the field oftentimes are all kind of blend into me. They play backwards and square, and, maybe they don't really compete at a really intense level, or whatever the case may be. And then And then you have those 2 or 3 kids that kind of jump out as being different, right? Like maybe it's a kid that's great in the air, or somebody that is really good 1v1, or somebody that just has an engine and a leadership characteristic that jumps out, and would translate to what you're looking for. And I guess it's those guys that are the ones we really are kind of looking for. And then at a very kind of basic level, and this has evolved over my time, but I used to have kind of I wouldn't say like a criteria rubric that I would look at in recruiting, but it was maybe a little more methodical than it is now. And really what I'm looking for now is guys that can come in and play right away. Mm-hmm. And I know very well, as all of our coaches do, like whether that happens or not is as much to do with, how they transition to the academic rigor and being away from home and all these new demands and expectations. But if a guy can't come in and push for time and really raise the standard and compete, then it's probably somebody that we shouldn't have in our group. So we try to recruit somebody that can come in right away and do it.
Yeah. Is that how you get the inner team competitiveness going? Is like you bring on guys who are going to push your older guys to be better, and they become better in that competition, and then over time,
so. Yeah, I hope so. And it's, and then it layers in new challenges, right? Of like how you manage the fabric of the team with people that have to be selfless, even when, some of their individual goals are different than what they thought before the year might be. And so, but yeah, certainly like that kind of environment is what we're looking for.
Let me ask you, because that's when you and it isn't necessarily Denison specific, and I was sort of told that, no, it's not, I didn't phrase it right. But whatever, I'll just say it the way it comes off the way it comes off. Is it just an honest question? What do you see players, high school players, that you recruit that lack or are just unprepared for, and there's no way to prepare them for it unless they get on campus and then they start day one of preseason?
Right. Yeah. It's a good question. I've thought about this a lot. I would say, and when we have, camps, or you talk to clubs and do a recruiting night or whatever it is, what I like to share with them, up until now, everything in their life as an athlete has been in what I would consider kind of the development phase of their athletic life. I mean, even, they go to these big tournaments and things, and they all want to win, and that's all great. But it pales in comparison to the rigor and the urgency that you see in a college soccer season. And, the difference between our year going to the tournament and not might revolve around 3 or 4 moments in a season. And it's hard to prepare guys for that. I mean, this is the competitive phase of their life. And to go from playing 10 months out of a year, and who knows, playing 30, 40, 50 matches in a season, to playing, 16 or 17 or 18 guaranteed matches in 11 weeks or 9 weeks, even, whatever it is. It's hard to prepare the guys for what that grind actually is like. But also, when you get into it and you experience it for the first time, I think it just gives them a much greater appreciation for, how hard it is, and they pass along those messages. And when they see the freshmen kind of hitting that wall, halfway through the year, they can kind of talk to them a little bit and help them along. And but I would say that's probably the biggest one.
Yeah. It's common theme, right? That's the thing that I find interesting, that the coach who told me that they're not lacking, it's just a new phase of their soccer growth, like that's coming to college is unlike anything they're ever going to experience, which is true.
I mean, it's hard to wrap their head around it. And, you talk to them in preseason, you're like, and I'll tell them, I go, guys, our season is going to be decided on October 22nd during midterms on the road in a midweek game at Hiram, and if we don't get a result, then we're not going to the NCAC tournament.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. We won the game in overtime. We got a result, and that kind of propelled us. But it's hard for them to kind of grasp that until you're in it, certainly.
Yeah.
But it's also, part of the fun. So
Yeah. No, it's quick. They do adapt, right? And I forget who said it. The best thing that happened to a freshman is they become a sophomore, right? So they have that experience already built in. But let me ask you something about camps, tournaments. What's from a recruiting standpoint for you? What's better? The camp, your Denison camp, or the camp that you host, or seeing somebody at a tournament, or which preference do you have?
I would prefer both. This is maybe a non-answer, but right, like I want to see what they are like in their own environment, with their own teammates and people they're comfortable with, and but then I look at our camp honestly as more of a service to the student, because now they have an opportunity for them to come for a couple of days and really do a deep dive into our program, if our program is a program of interest for them. And so for them to come for a couple of days and get to know some of our guys and get to know our staff better and get to see the college better, they're going to walk away either feeling like, yeah, I could really see myself being happy at Denison, or, I want to go somewhere bigger. I want to go somewhere, on the coasts, or whatever the case may be. So having kind of both of those is really nice. And, we're fortunate that I think, we're able to get out to different events. Our staff can, but then we also have the ability to kind of, bring folks on campus in the summer and just spend some time with us and get to know us and all that kind of stuff.
I have a theory of one of my many theories that I think the way camp IDs are like, I don't want to say mandatory, but if you're looking to get recruited, like, you have to do the college ID camp for both reasons, right? One, because you're put in that atmosphere of what a coach is going to be expecting of you, but then also that's your testing ground to see if you even like the place, right? And that's going to be your first, especially since the fall, your first fall is going to be immersed in that environment and the school.
Yeah, and to that point, I think that's the most important point you made, right? Like, if I knew why 17 or 18-year-old college age young men made decisions on schools, I'd be like Nick Saban and the best recruiter in the world. but usually they go on these campus visits, they meet with coaches, they see the campus, they see facilities, and whatever their short list is, 6, 8 schools, they do all those visits, and 2 to 3 separate themselves.
Yeah.
And when that happens, I just try to encourage kids to really kind of focus more intensely on each place, right? Like, so thinking about what their academic pathway might look like, certainly diving into the soccer side, maybe you come to a camp. I mean, all those things, if nothing else, just helps them make an informed decision.
Yeah, that's true. In my own experience with my kids, it's the same. It's like, if you're once you narrow down, be very intent about each place you go to, from a soccer, academic, all of those things, because you're committing 4 years of your life, right? And it's, you want to make sure you do that. You make the best choice for yourself. So last question here. What's the best way for someone to get your attention from a soccer perspective?
Yeah, email's the best start. It's funny though, like social media is changing everything. We get like direct messages on social media platforms. I mean, I guess that works too. But email generally is best. Typically, it's a good way for us to kind of get a snapshot of the athlete, but also I think we can also send them some things that I hope help them with their process. So usually that's the best way to start.
Yeah. Okay. So what I usually do is I go to your website and I grab all the links and I put them in the description down below, and just to facilitate. I do have a personal request because you mentioned. So I also played against Ohio Wesleyan.
Ah,
Yeah, didn't go well. Didn't go well. Actually, the first game I played, we were losing 2-0, and I came out for a ball and I dove at a train's feet, and I got knocked unconscious, and whatever. But more importantly, um, it probably explains a lot because I ended up 2 concussions against Ohio Wesleyan in the 2 years I played them. But if you ever get a chance to speak with Dr. Martin, I would love to interview him. He always used to come to the games. He'd have a golf club. He'd be swinging as he's coaching on the sidelines. So I'm like, anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, he's incredible. I wouldn't be who I am and where I am without him. He's a second father to me. Yeah, he's great. Yeah, we could spend a whole thing just talking about him. And yeah, he certainly would be somebody good to get on.
Yeah, he's a remarkable coach. I mean, Ohio Wesleyan has been a benchmark for a lot of schools since, again, early 80s when I was playing. Like, it was Ohio Wesleyan, and for the longest time it was only Ohio Wesleyan, and then Kenyon was coming up, and so what he's done there is just nothing short of remarkable as well. So anyhow, Coach, really do appreciate you taking the time. This was awesome. Thank you very much, and best of luck to you and your guys. And I will be watching. I will have more informed decisions in the fall, but would love to connect again before preseason to get your take on how things are going. And
yeah, sounds good.
All right.
Well, appreciate all you do for the game, and keep it up.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yep. Take care.